It was past midnight when I heard my wife Jenna whispering into her phone like she was planning a murder. I was under the hood of my beat-up Honda in our driveway, trying to fix the radiator leak that had been draining my wallet for weeks. The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers when her voice cut through the humid summer air. "Listen, I'm not backing down on this," she hissed into the phone. "I'm here for the house, Karen. That's all I've ever wanted from this marriage. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. 22 years of marriage, and she was talking about our home like it was some kind of prize she'd been waiting to claim. I pulled out my phone and hit record, my hands shaking as I captured every venomous word. Miles doesn't suspect anything yet. Eddie and I have been careful. Once the divorce papers are filed, I'll have everything lined up. The house, the savings, even his pension from the accounting firm. The recording app showed 30 seconds and counting. I kept the phone steady, even though I wanted to march inside and confront her right then and there. But something told me to wait, to gather more ammunition before I declared war. "No, Karen, I don't feel guilty. He's been a burden for years. At least Eddie makes me feel alive again." Eddie. I knew that name. Eddie Morrison, the slick car dealer who'd been sniffing around our neighborhood barbecues for the past 6 months. Always complimenting Jenna's cooking, always finding excuses to touch her arm when he laughed at her jokes. I'd thought he was just being friendly. Turns out I was the biggest fool in Michigan. I saved the recording and slipped the phone back into my pocket. When Jenna finally came outside, I was bent over the engine again, pretending to wrestle with a stubborn bolt. "Still working on that piece of junk?" she asked, her voice suddenly sweet as honey. The same voice that had been plotting my destruction 30 seconds earlier. "Yeah, well, not all of us can afford new cars every few years," I replied, not looking up. "Some of us have to make do with what we've got." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Maybe it's time to think about an upgrade, Miles. You're 45 years old. Don't you think you deserve better than a 15-year-old Honda?" I finally looked at her, really looked at her. Jenna was still beautiful at 40, with her auburn hair and sharp green eyes. But standing there in her silk pajamas, with her arms crossed and that condescending smile on her face, she looked like a stranger. A very dangerous stranger. "You're right," I said, wiping my hands on an old rag. "I do deserve better." The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove straight to my lawyer's office. Tom Bradley had handled our house purchase and a few minor legal issues over the years. He was a straight shooter, the kind of guy who didn't sugarcoat bad news. "Miles, good to see you," Tom said, shaking my hand as I settled into the leather chair across from his desk. "What brings you in today?" I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Tom's expression grew more serious with each passing second. When it finished, he leaned back in his chair and whistled low. "Well, that's certainly damning evidence of intent," he said. "But I have to ask, how did you obtain this recording?" She was standing in our driveway, talking loud enough to wake the neighbors. "I was working on my car. It's not like I broke into her phone or anything." Tom nodded. "That's good. Michigan is a one-party consent state for recordings, but since this was in a public space where she had no reasonable expectation of privacy, we're on solid ground. The question is, what do you want to do with this information?" I'd been thinking about that all night. Part of me wanted to confront Jenna immediately, to throw the evidence in her face and watch her squirm. But the smarter part of me, the part that had spent 2 decades balancing books and catching other people's financial mistakes, knew that patience would serve me better. "I want to be prepared," I said. "If she's planning to file for divorce and take everything, I need to protect myself. But I also want to know exactly what I'm dealing with. This Karen person she was talking to. She seemed to be calling the shots." Tom made some notes on his legal pad. "I'll need to do some research on your assets, make sure everything is properly documented. In the meantime, I'd suggest you start keeping a detailed record of your wife's activities. Times, dates, locations. If this Eddie Morrison is involved, we'll want evidence of the affair." "How much evidence do we need?" "In Michigan, adultery can affect property division and alimony, but the courts prefer clear, irrefutable proof. Photos, witnesses, financial records showing money spent on the affair partner. The more you can gather, the stronger your position will be." I left Tom's office with a list of tasks and a growing sense of purpose. For the first time in months, I felt like I had some control over my life. Jenna thought she was playing chess while I was stuck playing checkers. She was about to learn that I'd been studying the board a lot longer than she realized. That evening, I suggested we go to couples therapy. Jenna looked surprised, but agreed, probably thinking it would make her look good in a future divorce proceeding. I called Dr. Patricia Hoffman, a therapist who came highly recommended and had a reputation for getting to the truth quickly. I think it's wonderful that you're both willing to work on your marriage, Dr. Hoffman said during our first session the following week. She was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. What would you say are the main issues you'd like to address? Jenna launched into a prepared speech about growing apart, lack of communication, and feeling unfulfilled. She was good. I had to give her credit. She sounded like a woman genuinely trying to save her marriage. Miles, what's your perspective? Dr. Hoffman asked. I think Jenna has been very clear about her priorities, I said carefully. She's told me exactly what she wants from this relationship. Jenna shot me a sharp look, but I kept my expression neutral. Can you elaborate on that, Miles? I pretended to think for a moment. Well, just the other night, she told someone on the phone that she was here for the house. I thought that was pretty honest. The color drained from Jenna's face. Dr. Hoffman raised an eyebrow and made a note. Jenna, can you tell me what Miles is referring to? I don't know what he's talking about, Jenna stammered. Maybe he misheard something. Oh, I heard it very clearly, I said. You were standing right outside our bedroom window. You said you were here for the house, that it was all you wanted from the marriage. Dr. Hoffman looked between us, clearly sensing the tension in the room. Jenna, is there something you'd like to share about your feelings regarding your home and your marriage? Jenna recovered quickly, but I could see the panic in her eyes. I think Miles is taking something out of context. Yes, our house is important to me. It's our biggest investment, our security. If he heard me talking about protecting our assets, maybe that's what he's referring to. It was a good save, but not good enough. I had the recording, and now I had a witness to her reaction. Dr. Hoffman was sharp enough to read between the lines. The session ended with homework assignments about communication and trust. As we walked to our cars, Jenna grabbed my arm. What the hell was that about? She whispered angrily. What about? I thought we were supposed to be honest in therapy. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That comment about the house. I looked at her with mock confusion. Jenna, I'm just trying to save our marriage. Isn't that what you want? She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was trying to figure out how much I knew, how much danger she was in. Good. I'd let her sweat. That night, I started my surveillance in earnest. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. I'd go to work at the accounting firm, come home to stilted conversations over dinner, and then track my wife's movements like a private investigator. It was easier than I'd expected. Jenna had grown careless, probably assuming I was too trusting or too stupid to catch on. Tuesday nights were book club at Karen's house, except I followed her one Tuesday and watched her meet Eddie Morrison at the Riverside Motel on the outskirts of town. They stayed for 2 hours. I took photos of his red Mustang in the parking lot, along with timestamps and license plate numbers. Thursday evenings were yoga class. Another lie, she was meeting Eddie at his car lot after hours. I watched from across the street as they kissed in his office, the blinds open just enough for me to get clear shots with my camera. Mm-hmm. Karen Whitman turned out to be Jenna's college roommate and current best friend. She lived in an expensive subdivision about 20 minutes from our house, worked as a marketing director for a tech company, and had been divorced twice. Most importantly, she had a grudge against me that I was only beginning to understand. I remembered Karen from our early dating days. She'd never liked me, always making snide comments about my lack of ambition and suggesting Jenna could do better. What I hadn't known until I did some digging was that Karen had applied for a bookkeeping position at my firm about 10 years ago. I'd been part of the hiring committee that turned her down. Her qualifications were decent, but her attitude during the interview had been terrible. She'd acted entitled, like the job was beneath her, and had made disparaging comments about the company's outdated practices. Now it all made sense. This wasn't just about Jenna wanting out of our marriage. This was Karen's revenge, served cold after a decade of resentment. I started recording our therapy sessions with Dr. Hoffman's knowledge and consent, explaining that I wanted to review our conversations later to work on the issues we'd discussed. Jenna couldn't object without looking uncooperative. I've been thinking about what you said last week, Jenna, Dr. Hoffman said during our third session, about feeling like you're not getting what you need from your marriage. Can you be more specific about what you're looking for? Jenna glanced at me nervously before answering. I guess I want to feel valued, appreciated, like I'm more than just someone who keeps the house running and pays half the bills. That's understandable, Dr. Hoffman said. Miles, do you feel like you show Jenna appreciation for her contributions to your partnership? I try to, I said, but it's hard to know what she values when she's not honest about what she really wants. What do you mean by that? I looked directly at Jenna. I mean, she told me she was here for the house. Those were her exact words. So I guess my question is, are you here for the marriage, or are you here for the assets? Jenna's face flushed red. That's not fair, Miles. You're twisting my words. Am I? Because it seemed pretty clear to me. You said you were here for the house, that it was all you wanted from this relationship. Dr. Hoffman held up a hand. Let's slow down here. Jenna, can you help me understand what Miles is referring to? It seems like this conversation has been bothering both of you. Jenna was trapped, and she knew it. She couldn't deny saying it without looking like a liar, but she couldn't admit to it without revealing her true intentions. I may have said something about protecting our house, she said finally. We've worked hard to build equity in our home. If Miles heard me talking about that and misinterpreted it. The thing is, I interrupted, you weren't talking to me. You were talking to someone else about what you wanted from our marriage. And what you said was that you were here for the house, not for love, not for partnership, not for working things out. For the house. The room fell silent. Dr. Hoffman made notes while Jenna stared at her hands. Jenna, Dr. Hoffman said gently, is there something you'd like to share about your commitment to this marriage? Jenna looked up, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been genuine emotion cross her face. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But it was gone quickly, replaced by the defensive mask she'd been wearing for months. I'm committed to making this work, she said. I wouldn't be here otherwise. But her voice lacked conviction, and Dr. Hoffman clearly noticed. After that session, Jenna became more careful. She started leaving her phone in different rooms, taking calls outside, and varying her schedule. But she'd already given me enough ammunition to work with, and I was just getting started. I hired a private investigator named Rick Santos, a former police detective who specialized in marital cases. Rick was expensive, but Tom Bradley had recommended him, and I figured the investment would pay off in the divorce settlement. Your wife and this Eddie Morrison have been seeing each other for at least 6 months, Rick reported after a week of surveillance. They've got a routine, Tuesday nights at the Riverside Motel, Thursday evenings at his dealership, and Sunday afternoons at a cabin he rents on Lake Huron. A cabin? Yeah, it's registered under his business name. Morrison Auto Sales leases it year-round. They've been there every Sunday for the past month, staying 3 to 4 hours each time. Rick handed me a manila folder thick with photographs and documentation, Eddie and Jenna holding hands as they walked into the motel, Eddie's arm around Jenna's waist as they stood on the cabin's deck, Jenna laughing at something Eddie said as they sat in his car outside a restaurant I'd never been to. Looking at the photos hurt more than I'd expected. Not because I was still in love with Jenna. That feeling had died the night I recorded her phone call, but because they represented 22 years of my life that had apparently meant nothing to the woman I'd shared them with. There's something else, Rick said. This Karen Whitman has been busy. She's been asking questions about your finances, your work schedule, even your health insurance. I think she's helping your wife plan her exit strategy. What kind of questions? She called your HR department last week, claiming to be updating emergency contact information for Jenna. Asked about your pension plan, your life insurance policy, whether you had any disciplinary actions on your record. I felt a chill run down my spine. Did they give her any information? Not much, but she got enough to confirm you're in good standing and that your benefits are substantial. My guess is she's helping Jenna figure out what she stands to gain in a divorce settlement. That night, I sat in my home office and stared at the evidence spread across my desk. Photos, financial records, phone logs, witness statements. I had enough to destroy Jenna in divorce court, but something held me back from pulling the trigger immediately. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was anger, or maybe it was just the accountant in me, wanting to make sure every number added up perfectly before I closed the books on my marriage. I decided to give Jenna one more chance to come clean, not because I thought she would, but because I wanted to be absolutely certain about what I was dealing with. The opportunity came the following Friday night. Jenna had been acting nervous all week, taking hushed phone calls and spending hours on her laptop with the screen angled away from me. I suspected she was finally ready to make her move. Jenna, I said as we sat in the living room after dinner, we need to talk. She looked up from her laptop, and I saw fear flash across her face before she masked it with annoyance. About what? About us, about where this marriage is going, about whether we're both still committed to making it work. She closed the laptop and set it aside. Of course I'm committed, Miles. I thought that's what therapy was about. Is it? Because sometimes I get the feeling you've already made up your mind about what you want. Jenna studied my face, trying to read my intentions. What's that supposed to mean? It means I think you should be honest with me. If you want out of this marriage, just say so. We can handle this like adults. For a moment, I thought she might actually tell me the truth. Her shoulders sagged, and she looked tired, older than her 40 years. Miles, she started, then stopped. Things haven't been good between us for a long time. No, they haven't. Maybe we should consider taking a break, separating for a while to figure out what we really want. There it was. Not a confession, but close enough. She was testing the waters, seeing how I'd react to the idea of separation. Is there someone else, Jenna? The question hung in the air between us. This was her last chance to come clean, to salvage whatever respect I might still have for her. No, she said firmly. There's no one else. I just think we need some space to figure things out. And there it was, the final lie that sealed her fate. I nodded slowly. Okay, if that's what you think is best, we can discuss separation. Maybe you should talk to a lawyer, make sure you understand your options. Relief flooded her face. Really? You'd be okay with that? Jenna, I want you to be happy. If separating is what it takes, then we'll make it work. She actually smiled at me then, probably thinking I was going to make this easy for her, that I'd roll over and let her take half of everything I'd worked for while she rode off into the sunset with Eddie Morrison. She had no idea what was coming. 2 weeks later, Jenna served me with divorce papers. She'd hired Patricia Wells, one of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in the city, and was asking for spousal support, half of all marital assets, and exclusive use of the house during the separation period. I read through the papers twice, marveling at the audacity. According to Jenna's filing, I was emotionally distant, financially controlling, and had failed to support her personal and professional growth. She painted herself as a victim of my neglect, trapped in a loveless marriage with a man who didn't appreciate her contributions. There was no mention of Eddie Morrison, no acknowledgement of her affair, no hint that she'd been planning this betrayal for months while pretending to work on our marriage in therapy. Tom Bradley reviewed the papers and shook his head. She's asking for everything, Miles. The house, half your pension, spousal support for 10 years. If you agreed to this, you'd be starting over with almost nothing. Good thing I'm not agreeing to it. No, we're definitely fighting this. But I want you to be prepared. This is going to get ugly. Patricia Wells doesn't play nice, and your wife seems determined to paint you as the villain. Let her try. I've got 22 years of being a faithful husband and provider. What's she got? Tom smiled grimly. That's exactly what we're going to find out. The first shot across the bow came 3 days later. I arrived at work to find my boss, Janet Morrison, waiting in my office. Janet was Eddie's older sister, a fact I'd somehow overlooked until Rick Santos pointed it out in his background report. Miles, we need to talk, Janet said, closing the door behind her. I've received some concerning information about your personal situation. I kept my expression neutral. What kind of information? Someone called yesterday, claiming you've been using company resources for personal business. Specifically, that you've been conducting surveillance activities during work hours and using our equipment to investigate your wife. The accusation was partially true. I had used my work computer to research Eddie's business and Karen's employment history. But I'd done it during my lunch breaks, and I'd been careful not to access anything that would violate company policy. Who made this complaint? The caller didn't leave a name, but Miles, you know how seriously we take any misuse of company resources. I'm going to need you to take some time off while we investigate this. Suspended, 2 weeks without pay while they investigated allegations that would be impossible to prove. It was a clever move. Eddie probably convinced his sister to create problems for me at work, knowing that financial pressure would make me more likely to accept a quick divorce settlement. But they'd underestimated how thoroughly I'd prepared for this war. I cleaned out my desk and drove straight to Tom's office. They're trying to squeeze me financially, I explained, making it harder for me to fight the divorce. Expected, Tom said, but we've got bigger problems. Patricia Wells filed a motion for temporary exclusive use of the marital home. She's claiming you've become hostile and threatening, that Jenna fears for her safety. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Threatening? I haven't raised my voice to her once since this started. I know, but she's got a witness who says otherwise. Karen Whitman filed an affidavit claiming she heard you threatening Jenna during a phone conversation. That's impossible. I never threatened Jenna, and I've never spoken to Karen on the phone. I believe you, but we need to be prepared for the possibility that they're going to escalate these claims. False allegations of domestic violence or threats are common in contentious divorces. That evening, I came home to find the locks changed and a restraining order taped to my front door. According to the court documents, I was prohibited from entering the marital home, contacting Jenna directly, or coming within 500 feet of her workplace. I sat in my car in the driveway, staring at the house I'd called home for 15 years. Every mortgage payment, every repair, every improvement, all of it paid for with my labor and my dreams of building something lasting with the woman who was now treating me like a dangerous criminal. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Sorry it had to be this way. You should have just agreed to the separation. Jay. I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Tom. Direct contact in violation of her own restraining order. Jenna was getting sloppy, probably feeling overconfident now that she had me out of the house. I checked into a motel and spent the night planning my counterattack. Tom had scheduled a hearing for the following week to challenge the restraining order, but I wasn't going to wait for the legal system to vindicate me. It was time to start playing offense. The next morning, I called Rick Santos. I want you to expand the surveillance. I want to know everything about Eddie Morrison's business, his finances, his personal life, and I want the same deep dive on Karen Whitman. What are you looking for? Leverage. These people think they can destroy my reputation and steal my assets without consequences. They're about to learn otherwise. Rick's report arrived 2 days later, and it was even better than I'd hoped. Eddie Morrison was running his car dealership on borrowed time. He owed money to 3 different banks, had defaulted on 2 business loans, and was being investigated by the state for odometer fraud. His personal finances were a disaster. Credit cards maxed out, mortgage payments behind, and a gambling problem that had cost him over $50,000 in the past year. Karen Whitman had her own secrets. She'd been fired from her previous job for embezzling company funds, though the charges had been dropped when she'd made restitution. Her current employer didn't know about her criminal history, and she'd lied on her employment application about her reason for leaving her previous position. But the most interesting discovery was the connection between Karen and Eddie. They'd known each other for over a year, long before Eddie had started coming to our neighborhood barbecues. Karen had introduced him to Jenna, orchestrated their initial meetings, and had been coaching both of them throughout the affair. This wasn't just adultery. This was a conspiracy, carefully planned and executed with the goal of destroying my marriage and stealing my assets. I spent the weekend documenting everything, creating a timeline that showed how Karen and Eddie had manipulated Jenna into the affair and the divorce. By Sunday night, I had a comprehensive file that would not only destroy Jenna's case, but potentially expose Karen and Eddie to criminal charges. The hearing on the restraining order was scheduled for Tuesday morning. I arrived at the courthouse early, dressed in my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of evidence that would change everything. Jenna was already there with Patricia Wells, looking nervous but determined. She'd lost weight and looked older, stress lines visible around her eyes. When she saw me, she quickly looked away, but not before I caught a flash of what might have been regret. Eddie was there too, sitting in the back of the courtroom like a spectator at a sporting event. He was wearing an expensive suit that he probably couldn't afford, his dark hair slicked back and a confident smirk on his face. Karen sat beside him, whispering in his ear and occasionally glancing in my direction with undisguised hatred. Judge Patricia Hoffman, yes, the same name as our therapist, though no relation, called the case. She was known for being tough but fair, with little patience for frivolous motions or manufactured drama. Ms. Wells, your client has requested a restraining order against her husband based on allegations of threatening behavior. What evidence do you have to support these claims? Patricia Wells stood and presented Karen's affidavit, along with Jenna's statement claiming she feared for her safety. It was thin evidence, mostly hearsay and vague allegations about my increasingly hostile demeanor. Mr. Bradley, how does your client respond to these allegations? Tom stood and smiled. Your Honor, my client categorically denies these allegations. In fact, we have substantial evidence that this restraining order is part of a broader conspiracy to defraud Mr. Peterson of his marital assets. Judge Hoffman raised an eyebrow. That's a serious accusation, Counselor. Yes, it is, and we have serious evidence to support it. Tom presented the recording of Jenna's phone call, the surveillance photos of her affair, and the financial records showing Eddie's desperate situation. But the real bombshell was Karen's criminal history and her connection to Eddie predating the affair. Your Honor, this isn't a case of domestic violence or threatening behavior. This is a case of 3 individuals conspiring to destroy my client's marriage and steal his assets through fraudulent legal proceedings. The courtroom was silent as Judge Hoffman reviewed the evidence. I watched Jenna's face go pale as she realized how much I knew. Eddie's confident smirk had disappeared, replaced by the look of a man who just realized he was in serious trouble. Ms. Wells, Judge Hoffman said finally, do you have any response to this evidence? Patricia Wells looked stunned. She'd clearly been caught off guard by the depth of our preparation. Your Honor, while my client's personal relationships are not ideal, they don't negate her legitimate fears about her husband's behavior. What behavior, specifically? Because I'm looking at evidence of an extensive conspiracy involving your client, her lover, and her friend, but I'm not seeing any evidence that Mr. Peterson has done anything more threatening than hire a private investigator to document his wife's adultery. Judge Hoffman dismissed the restraining order and ordered Jenna to allow me back into the marital home. But more importantly, she ordered an investigation into the circumstances surrounding the divorce filing, including potential perjury charges for the false statements in Karen's affidavit. As we left the courthouse, I saw Eddie and Karen in heated conversation by his car. Jenna stood alone near the courthouse steps, looking lost and defeated. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She'd been manipulated by people who cared more about revenge and money than her well-being. But then I remembered her voice on that recorded phone call, cold and calculating as she planned to take everything I'd worked for. The war was far from over, but I'd won the first major battle, and my enemies were starting to realize they'd underestimated their opponent. It was time to press my advantage. The investigation that Judge Hoffman ordered moved quickly. Within a week, Karen Whitman was arrested for perjury and conspiracy to commit fraud. The charges related not only to her false affidavit in my case, but also to irregularities the investigators found in her current employment and financial records. Eddie Morrison's world collapsed even faster. The state investigation into his dealership uncovered systematic odometer fraud, tax evasion, and loan fraud. His assets were frozen, his business license was suspended, and he was looking at serious prison time. But the most satisfying moment came when I returned home to find Jenna sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by legal documents and looking like she hadn't slept in days. "Hello, Jenna," I said, setting down my briefcase and loosening my tie. "How was your day?" She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Miles, we need to talk." "Do we? Because the last time we talked, you had me served with divorce papers and a restraining order." I know how this looks, but I need you to understand. I never wanted it to go this far." I poured myself a glass of water and sat across from her at the table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the years. "How far did you want it to go exactly?" "I just wanted out. I wanted a clean separation, a fair division of assets, and a chance to start over. With Eddie Morrison." She flinched at his name. "That's over. It's been over since the hearing. Miles, I had no idea about his financial problems, about the illegal things he was doing. Karen told me he was successful, stable. Karen told you a lot of things, didn't she? Like how to maximize your settlement, how to get me out of the house, how to destroy my reputation at work." Jenna's face crumpled. "I never wanted to hurt you like this. I know you don't believe me, but I didn't know about Karen's plan. I thought I was just protecting myself." I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. But all I saw was exhaustion and regret. "Protecting yourself from what, Jenna? From a husband who worked 60-hour weeks to give you the life you wanted? From a man who never cheated, never lied, never gave you any reason to doubt his commitment? From a marriage that was slowly eliminating both of us," she said quietly. "Miles, we haven't been happy for years. We've been going through the motions, pretending everything was fine when we both knew it wasn't." She wasn't wrong about that. Our marriage had been fading slow for years, eliminated by routine and complacency and the gradual erosion of whatever love we'd once shared, but that didn't justify what she'd done. "So you decided to burn it all down instead of trying to fix it." I tried to fix it. The therapy, the attempts at communication. I was trying, Miles. But you were so distant, so closed off. And then Karen introduced me to Eddie, and for the first time in years, I felt alive again. "And you decided that feeling was worth destroying everything we'd built together." Jenna wiped her eyes with a tissue. "I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I never wanted to hurt you like this." I leaned back in my chair, considering my options. The evidence I'd gathered would ensure that I kept the house, most of our assets, and my reputation. Jenna would be lucky to walk away with enough money to start over in a modest apartment. Her legal bills alone would consume most of whatever settlement she might receive. But looking at her now, broken and defeated, I realized that complete victory would taste like ash in my mouth. "What do you want from me, Jenna?" "I want to settle this without destroying each other completely. I'll drop all the demands for spousal support and exclusive use of the house. I'll take responsibility for my legal bills. I just want enough to start over somewhere else." It was a reasonable offer, more reasonable than she had any right to expect given what she'd put me through. But there was one more thing I needed to know. "Why, Jenna? After 22 years, why did you choose to handle this the way you did? Why not just ask for a divorce honestly?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands folded on the table. "Because I was ashamed," she said finally. "Ashamed that I'd fallen out of love with you. Ashamed that I'd found someone else. Ashamed that I wanted to end our marriage. It seemed easier to make you the villain than to admit I was the one who'd given up. So you let Karen convince you to destroy me instead. Karen was angry about not getting that job at your firm. She'd been carrying that grudge for 10 years, and when I told her about my problems with Eddie, she saw an opportunity for revenge. She made it sound like you owed me something, like I deserved to take everything as compensation for years of unhappiness. And you believed her. I wanted to believe her. It was easier than taking responsibility for my own choices. I sat in silence, processing everything she'd told me. The woman across from me bore little resemblance to the confident, manipulative person I'd been fighting for the past month. This was just a middle-aged woman who'd made a series of terrible decisions and was finally facing the consequences. "I'll consider your offer," I said finally. "But there are conditions." "What conditions?" "First, you testify fully and honestly in Karen's criminal trial. No protecting her, no minimizing her role in this conspiracy. She destroyed both of our lives for the sake of a 10-year-old grudge, and she deserves whatever punishment she gets." Jenna nodded. "I'll testify. Karen used me as much as I let her use you. Second, you get help. Real help. Not just the couples therapy we tried. You need to figure out why you were willing to destroy a 22-year marriage instead of having one honest conversation about what you wanted. I've already started seeing a therapist, Dr. Martinez downtown." "Good. Third, once this is settled, we don't contact each other unless it's absolutely necessary. No attempts at friendship, no nostalgic phone calls, no trying to maintain some kind of relationship for old time's sake." This condition seemed to hurt her more than the others. "Miles, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope someday—" "No," I interrupted. "There's no someday, Jenna. You made your choice when you decided to conspire with Karen and Eddie to destroy my life. I'm willing to settle this fairly, but I'm not willing to pretend we can be friends." She nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I understand. What about the house?" "I'm keeping it. You can take whatever personal belongings you want, but this is my home now." "And the other assets?" "We'll split them fairly, but not equally. Your affair and the conspiracy will be factored into the settlement. You'll have enough to start over, but you won't profit from what you've done." Jenna agreed to all my conditions. 2 weeks later, we signed a settlement agreement that gave me the house, most of our retirement savings, and my freedom. Jenna received enough money to rent an apartment and start over, along with her car and personal belongings. Karen Whitman was sentenced to 2 years in prison for perjury and conspiracy. Eddie Morrison received 5 years for fraud and tax evasion. Both of them lost everything in the legal proceedings, their lives destroyed by their own greed and vindictiveness. The final chapter came 6 months later, when I received a letter from Jenna. She'd moved to Arizona, found a job with a small nonprofit organization, and was working to rebuild her life. She didn't ask for forgiveness or try to justify what she'd done. She simply wanted me to know that she was taking responsibility for her actions and trying to become a better person. I read the letter twice, then threw it away. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. But as I sat in my home office that evening, reviewing the financial statements that showed my accounts slowly recovering from the legal fees and settlement costs, I realized that I'd gained something valuable from the whole ordeal. I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd thought, smarter than my enemies had assumed, and capable of fighting for what mattered to me. I'd also learned that 22 years of marriage, no matter how it ended, had taught me things about myself that I never would have discovered otherwise. I knew now that I could survive betrayal, that I could rebuild from nothing, and that I deserved better than a partner who would conspire to destroy me rather than have an honest conversation about our problems. 3 months later, I was reinstated at work with full back pay and a formal apology from Janet Morrison, who'd been forced to admit that the complaints against me were fabricated. Eddie's conviction had destroyed her credibility, and the company was eager to avoid any appearance of having participated in the conspiracy against me. I threw myself into my work with renewed energy, taking on new clients and building the kind of career I'd always been capable of, but had never pursued while I was focused on maintaining a failing marriage. Within a year, I'd been promoted to senior partner and was earning more money than I ever had before. But the real victory wasn't financial or professional. It was personal. I'd faced the worst betrayal imaginable and come out stronger on the other side. I'd learned to trust my instincts, to fight for myself, and to never again accept less than I deserved from the people in my life. One evening, as I sat on the deck of the house that was now truly mine, I raised a glass of wine in a toast to the recording device that had started it all. That 30-second audio clip had saved my life, my home, and my future. It had shown me who my enemies really were and given me the ammunition I needed to defeat them. "Here's to the truth," I said aloud, looking out at the sunset over the neighborhood where I'd built my life. "And here's to never having to share it with people who don't deserve it." I finished my wine, went inside, and locked the door behind me. My home, my sanctuary, my victory. Karen Whitman had wanted revenge for a job she'd never deserved. Eddie Morrison had wanted easy money and another man's wife. Jenna had wanted a new life without the courage to ask for it honestly. They'd all gotten exactly what they deserved, and so had I.